a lot of women have to earn the respect that is naturally just handed to men in the workplace. Because you shouldn't have to sacrifice your reputation or how people perceive you or how much people like you just to be recognized and respected for your intelligence and your hard work as a woman. And so there's this trade-off that I feel like many women have to choose in their lives. The bitch is someone who is respected for her work, and then to not be a bitch means that you're treated more nicely, but you just are not respected for your intelligence or work ethic or diligence or anything like that. And as someone who is really ambitious, I have always opted to be the bitch. But this is a question that I think in one way or another, a lot of women have to answer. I know is that I've had to make a choice, and I've made my choice as the bitch, and I can tell you like what the consequences have been for that. Okay, everyone. Hello. Welcome to episode 4 of The Hot Thought. I'm your host, Liv Yoon, and this is a podcast for young women navigating their early womanhood. We break down everything from confidence, relationships, work, ambition, friendships, and everything in between. Today is a bit of a special episode, and honestly, I think the next couple episodes will be a bit special just because I'm gonna be moving settings around a little bit. I graduated from college, moved out of my dorm, and so this is my childhood bedroom. And since I'll be living in Europe for most of the summer, the setting might be a little bit different for the next couple episodes. So today, I'm honestly just sipping on water, which I know is a little bit boring, but I brought incense, which I've been meaning to incorporate more in episodes, and I actually, just being back in my childhood room, I've discovered a bunch of crystals that I used to have in high school. I was a big astrology and crystal girl, hence where the whole incense came from. So let's start by lighting the incense. There we go. Okay, today I want to talk about ambition as a young woman and a lot of dynamics that happen in the workplace or in academic settings. As I've been reflecting on my time at Penn, I think this is a very common theme that showed up, and it's something that I think about a lot when it comes to work. Today's setting is a little bit different because I'm back in my childhood bedroom. I've put on a bunch of random clothes that I didn't bring to college, so, whenever you're back in your childhood home in between and you're wearing like random clothes you used to wear in high school. And so today's hot thought of the day is a classic Shakespearean quote, to be or not to be, and then in parentheses after, a bitch. So to be or not to be a bitch. That's the hot thought. That's the question of the day. And as I've been reflecting on my time at Penn, this is a question that I found myself having to ask quite a lot. And really it comes down to respect in the workplace for women and in academic settings. Now, I think this whole philosophical question began in my head my sophomore year when I joined this club, and as a consultant lead, I was on executive board of this club, which was mostly men. And I very quickly realized throughout the semester that a lot of these guys on the exec board didn't think I was smart. And I'm used to this because I studied communications, and that's typically a major that people like joke about being like a fluffy major, like English, art history, communications, whatever. So I was used to that, but I definitely felt this gendered dynamic going on because other guys that were consultants and other people that were on exec board didn't quite get the same treatment. And I worked really hard that semester. I think sophomore fall was probably like my most in the trenches semester out of all of college. Like I was awfully down bad with so many credits, really intensely doing club work, looking for internships. And I did a great job with my consulting project. Like I pulled through, I got the job done and exceeded expectations. And once I did that, there was a switch in the exec board and how I was perceived and also how I was respected and spoken to. I felt like I had finally achieved becoming a member of this inner circle. But what I realized was that from day one, the same guys with the same skill level as me were already accepted into this inner circle and handed this amount of respect that I had to spend all semester working for. And that was when I realized that a lot of women have to earn the respect that is naturally just handed to men in the workplace. And once I made that realization, the easier it was for me to spot in so many different cases. And so in the next couple years of college, whenever I was on a big project for a club or during my internships or whatnot, I realized that I had two choices when it came to the workplace. And it was to be a bitch or to not be a bitch. Now, what I mean by this is the bitch is someone who is respected for her work, but she kind of has this archetype of being cold, kind of rude, kind of full of herself, and not sexually desirable because she's a bitch. She's someone that is kind of an op to men, but at the very least, she knows how to get her work done and they do respect her on that business level. And then to not be a bitch means that you're treated more nicely. You know, people smile at you more. You don't rock the boat so much and you don't have as much of a negative perception or as much hate, but you just are not respected for your intelligence or work ethic or diligence or anything like that. And so in most women, I think, are conditioned and feel like the better option is to not be the bitch, because I think the worst thing for a lot of young women is to feel like we're being disruptive, we're being too loud, we're being too out there. And of course, being perceived as a bitch doesn't really make you desirable at all. And so there's this trade-off that I feel like many women have to choose in their lives. And as someone who is really ambitious, I have always opted to be the bitch because there is nothing that is worse to me than not being respected for my intelligence and for the hard work that I put in. But this is a question that I think in one way or another, a lot of women have to answer. And a lot of women find very unique ways to dance around it, to balance both. But it's kind of this effed up, like eggshell, like walking on eggshell dance that so many of us have to do. And so as only a 22-year-old, I'm able to identify this problem, but I don't necessarily know how to solve it. I don't really have all of the answers here. What I know is that I've had to make a choice and I've made my choice as the bitch. And I can tell you like what the consequences have been for that. Now, being the bitch, being a woman who like commands respect in the workplace or any like professional academic setting is great because you're being respected, but also you have all these negative perceptions around you. And the thing is, a lot of people don't want to see you win. Like a lot of people want to see you fail. I think especially as a content creator, the bigger I've gotten, the more I feel like, the more I can see that people who, especially guys that used to kind of make fun of me making content or just not really believe in me or take me that seriously, once I hit a certain number of followers, there was kind of a big switch up going on. And while it's great that these people finally are seeing me and recognizing the hard work I've put into content creation, I also feel like I don't trust anyone. I don't really trust how I'm being perceived by other people. I also don't trust that everyone who is friendly to me actually wants the best for me or to help me. And that's a really shitty experience. Now, obviously, not all of you guys are going to be content creators or anything like that. But I do think, I also will be working a corporate job. And I do think when you're a woman who does well, who excels, who works hard, there are going to be a lot more eyes on you. And people are going to scrutinize you a lot more. And I don't know. I think that's something I'm still gonna have to learn how to navigate, but it is a trade-off. I understand that some people would rather not have that and some people would rather not be the bitch. Now, the trade-off of not being the bitch, as I experienced my sophomore year of college, is that there might often be this sort of like hierarchy, right? Like this, I don't want to say condescending, but there's kind of this dynamic of like, oh, like she doesn't really know any better, or like she's not really on the same level as us. And a lot of times people play it as like this kind of endearing, like, oh, it's so adorable, like she was a communications major, like things like that. And that is also really shitty to have to reconcile with and have to deal with, because you shouldn't have to sacrifice your reputation or how people perceive you or how much people like you just to be recognized and respected for your intelligence and your hard work as a woman. So I am someone who will always choose being the bitch, but I also totally understand why people don't want to be, because it can suck in its own way. Now, I do have hope that this dynamic will dilute itself over time, especially because we're seeing so much more women in the workforce and going to college, that inevitably we are going to have female CEOs, we're going to have more female entrepreneurs, and just women in leadership positions. And over time, I'm really hopeful that maybe that dynamic will change so that we don't even have to make this stupid choice in the first place, or at least try to balance and walk on eggshells between these choices. I do really think that we should be able to do girly things, to be feminine, to do whatever we want and still be respected in the workplace and in academic settings. And I think that's why like the movie Legally Blonde actually, I think tackles this question very well. Like being someone who's very feminine, being someone who loves pink, who was in a sorority, but also someone who's incredibly intelligent and trying to find respect for your intelligence. Now, as someone who was in a major that was predominantly women and is going to be working in a field which is marketing that is also predominantly women, I feel like I've been able to be in environments where I feel a lot more hopeful about this. I'm not in a field like STEM or finance where it is pretty much all men, and if you're a woman, like you are really, really going to have to choose between this. But I'm very grateful to be in fields where there are women who are running the marketing for entire brands. There are women who are doing some really, really cool stuff, and they're respected. Now, that's not to say that there's zero problems at all, because I do think this dynamic just inherently brings out a lot of internalized misogyny with women, because duh, right? But I do feel very hopeful that eventually women won't have to make such a decision between how they're perceived and how they're respected for their intelligence. Now, honestly, as just a 22-year-old woman who's not even 100% entered into the workforce yet, I can't say exactly how to fix this or tell you exactly how to navigate this in your everyday life. But I will say just being able to be aware of this dynamic makes you move a lot smarter. Having that experience in my consulting club sophomore year really informed how I approach like professional settings in my early career. Because as messed up as it is for women to be perceived differently in the workplace, it's also really important to understand that that's a reality, and there are ways to play that to your advantage or ways to maneuver things a bit smoothly now that you're very aware of how people might be perceiving you. I'll probably make a follow-up episode to this like a few months or even like a year into my job. But yeah, this is something I've really been thinking about since I graduated college, since it was such a strong theme in undergrad. And I honestly think the more I start working, the more I'm in the workforce, the more prevalent it might be. Or maybe not. I don't know. I'm hopeful. I do recommend marketing to just like even try out being in that environment where like your team is all women. Like my summer internship last year, my team was 100% women. And it was such an incredible experience because I think women can be so collaborative and so creative and do some really cool shit. So it's been such a pleasure to work with women. And I really do feel positive about the future for these dynamics. But until then, I'll be the bitch. Okay, that was the hot thought of the day, you guys. Just as our incense is about to die out, to be or not to be a bitch. I hope this was helpful. I know this wasn't an episode where I gave you a clear-cut solution because it's honestly something that I'm still navigating. If you have any insights or any comments, I would love to hear in the comment section what you guys think, especially like for women that are going through their first professional experiences or have had a similar situation, but also from older women who have a bit more experience and insight. And until then, stay tuned for the next episode. I'll probably be in a different bed in a different setting next time, but I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.